What if I told you that the first global conflict of the 20th century was sparked by a single bullet? Welcome to the tale of World War I, a war of unprecedented scale that raged from 1914 to 1918, involving major powers across the globe. This was a war that redefined boundaries, shook empires to their core, and altered the course of history. This is the story of World War I. A conflict that forever changed the world. The fuse was lit long before the first shot was fired. Europe in the early 20th century was a hotbed of tension. Nationalism was on the rise, with nations seeking to assert their power and influence. Militarism became an obsession, with countries competing to amass the largest armies and navies. Intricate alliances were formed, binding nations together in a web of mutual defense pacts. And then there was imperialism, the race for colonies and resources. These were the volatile ingredients that set the stage for a conflict of unprecedented scale. Yet it was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo in June 1914 that provided the spark. An event that may have been just a footnote in history became the trigger for a global upheaval. The heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne was shot dead by a Serbian nationalist, and the dominoes began to tumble. This assassination was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe. In a domino effect of alliances, war spread like wildfire. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand ignited a flame that quickly escalated into a full-blown inferno. Austria-Hungary, still reeling from the loss of their heir, declared war on Serbia. This move was backed by Germany, their ally, and set the gears of conflict in motion. The rest of Europe couldn't stand by and watch. Russia, bound by a treaty, came to Serbia's defense. France, entwined in an alliance with Russia, was drawn into the fray. Suddenly the continent was on the brink of a war that would span years and take millions of lives. And then Germany made a move that would truly mark the start of hostilities. In a sweeping maneuver designed to outflank the French army, they invaded neutral Belgium. This blatant violation of Belgium's neutrality provoked Britain to declare war on Germany. France was next, coming under attack from the German forces. The stage was set for a war unlike any before. The war of movement soon became a war of attrition. As armies on the Western Front dug into the earth, the concept of trench warfare took hold. Picture a network of narrow, muddy ditches stretching from the English Channel to the Swiss border. Soldiers huddled in these trenches, facing not only the enemy but also harsh weather, poor sanitation, rats, and lice. The trenches became the front line, a brutal and unforgiving landscape punctuated by barbed wire, sandbags, and the constant threat of artillery fire. No man's land, a desolate expanse of ground between opposing trenches, bore witness to countless charges and countercharges in an attempt to gain territory. Two battles exemplify the deadly stalemate of trench warfare, the Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun. The Somme, a river in northern France, was the site of a 5-month-long battle in 1916. Despite over 1 million casualties, the Allies advanced just 6 miles. Verdun, a fortress town in northeastern France, was the stage for a 10-month German offensive. The French, with the rallying cry, "They shall not pass," managed to hold their ground, but at a staggering cost of over 300,000 lives. These battles highlight the grim reality of trench warfare. Advances were measured in yards, not miles, and victory often meant merely surviving another day. In the trenches, the war became a deadly waiting game. While the Western Front was locked in a stalemate, the Eastern Front was a different story. Here, vast distances and harsh weather conditions made warfare a logistical nightmare. Yet this didn't prevent some significant battles from taking place. In the east, Germany and Russia clashed head-on. The Battle of Tannenberg in August of 1914 was a disaster for the Russian army. A combination of poor communication, lack of intelligence, and tactical errors led to a crushing defeat, with the loss of over 30,000 men. Fast forward to June 1916. And we see the Brusilov offensive. This was Russia's finest hour during the war. General Alexei Brusilov launched a surprise attack against the Austro-Hungarian forces. Despite initial successes, the offensive ultimately stalled, but not before inflicting heavy casualties on the Central Powers. But the war wasn't confined to Europe. Oh no, it spread its tentacles far and wide. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, opening up new fronts in Arabia and Palestine. Africa, too, saw its share of conflict as German colonies became targets for Allied forces. And let's not forget Asia, where Japan seized German territories in the Pacific. The world was truly at war, with nations far removed from the epicenter of conflict finding themselves drawn into the maelstrom. From the frozen plains of Russia to the hot sands of Arabia, from the jungles of Africa to the islands of the Pacific, World War I had indeed become a global conflict. The war saw a revolution in the art of warfare. The 4 years of conflict from 1914 to 1918 were marked by rapid technological advancements that changed the face of armed conflict forever. In the trenches, the once noble image of the cavalry charge was replaced with the chilling rattle of machine guns. These mechanical monsters could mow down hundreds of soldiers in a matter of minutes, leading to unprecedented casualties on both sides. Alongside machine guns, poison gas was introduced, bringing a new level of terror to the battlefield. Soldiers found themselves not only fighting an enemy they could see, but also an invisible killer that choked life away. The stalemate of trench warfare led to the development of a new war machine, the tank. These steel beasts, impervious to machine gun fire, crawled across no man's land, crushing barbed wire and trenches under their relentless treads. And above it all, aircraft took warfare to the skies. What started as mere reconnaissance soon turned into deadly dogfights with the advent of fighter planes. By the end of the war, bombers were dropping death from above, adding a third dimension to the battlefield. These innovations not only transformed the nature of warfare, but also escalated the scale of death and destruction. Technology had turned war into an industrial-scale slaughter. The war was not just fought on the front lines, it permeated the fabric of everyday life, leaving no one untouched. Civilians on the home front grappled with rationing as resources were redirected to support the war effort. Food became scarce, and families had to make do with less. At the same time, propaganda painted a picture of heroic soldiers and a just cause. It seeped into schools, churches, and homes, shaping public sentiments and urging more young men to join the fight. The war also ushered in a seismic shift in societal roles. With men on the front lines, women stepped into the workforce in unprecedented numbers. They took on roles in factories, offices, and farms, marking the onset of a new era of women's rights and empowerment. But the war also fanned the flames of discontent, sparking social unrest and revolutions in several countries. The war was changing societies even as it raged on. The tide of the war changed with the entry of a new player. The year was 1917. Across the Atlantic, the United States, initially a bystander, found itself drawn into the conflict. The cause? Unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany and a secret message known as the Zimmermann Telegram, promising Mexico-American territories in return for their alliance. This provoked the United States into declaring war, tipping the scales in favor of the Allies. The American entry provided fresh troops and resources, revitalizing the weary Allies. It was a turning point, leading to the eventual collapse of the Central Powers. By the autumn of 1918, exhausted and overwhelmed, Germany requested an armistice. Finally, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the armistice took effect. The Great War, the war to end all wars, was over. The guns finally fell silent. The echoes of the Great War can still be heard today. The Treaty of Versailles, intended to ensure peace, instead sowed seeds of resentment in post-war Europe. The staggering human cost, with millions of lives lost, is a haunting reminder of the war's brutality. Borders were redrawn, empires fell, and nations were reborn. Yet the legacy of World War I is perhaps most evident in its role as a precursor to the even more devastating World War II. World War I was not the war to end all wars, but it was a war that ended an era.